Are you already a wiki saner?
A warm welcome, dear viewers, to our show on natural medicine. Today we will discuss how we women could change the world. I am speaking with Alexandra Kotthaus, who is the head physician of the BioMed Centre Sonnenberg in Schwellbrunn. And I believe she is the person who can tell us quite a lot comprehensively about this. Stay tuned. Hello, dear Alexandra.
Hello, Livia.
A topic that is really motivating me right now to talk about what capabilities we as women could bring to the world and maybe also work together on these capabilities a bit more.
Zusammen an diesen Fähigkeiten zu arbeiten, ja.
Yes, I wished for this topic.
Das Thema und
I find myself getting quite emotional and maybe letting myself get too carried away because I wanted to be much more provocative, and that's already revealing.
Ja. Und sollen wir den noch verraten?
No, maybe no. I think that's very good.
Nein, ich finde das sehr gut, ne, dass
we said, okay, we'll try to keep it more positive and maybe a little less provocative. But somehow I want to make it clear that I really think we women have the opportunity to change the world.
Die Welt zu verändern.
And I think it's about time. And it's also very much about coming together.
Und
maybe what really sparked the impulse in me was that I stumbled upon them again and again. So that one weekend, when I was alone at home, I participated in an online conference.
Wo ich allein zu Hause war, einem Online-Kongress teilgenommen habe.
Which went on into the night because it took place in the USA and not at our time.
Nicht zu unserer Zeit.
And then I started preparing dinner. There was someone else I wanted to hear. And I thought, well, you're alone. You can turn it on and listen in. And then I put on my headset and listened while I was chopping my dinner. And I thought, that sounds pretty good. It doesn't sound so out of touch and otherworldly. Okay, now I'm curious.
She speaks my language.
And yes, what she did was women-centered coaching, speaking the language of women. And she really spoke to my soul. At first, I was just totally baffled. This fire in you as a woman, wanting to perhaps change the world. What also kindled that fire in me was that 55,000 women from over 100 countries worldwide participated in this Congress simultaneously.
100 Ländern der Welt gleichzeitig teilgenommen haben.
What energy?
Yes. And then it dawned on me. And I know my mother doesn't speak fluent English. She couldn't have participated in this Congress. But she also wants to contribute to making this place or this world a better world.
Oder diese Welt eine bessere Welt wird.
And then it dawned on me. Then I did some calculations. 55,000 women brought together at the same time.
Gleichzeitig unter einen Hut gebracht.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg. In every country, there are women who work towards the same goal, who strive to make the world better, for children to have a better future. And they just need to unite more. And then you can create something like a critical mass movement. Yes, that made me feel so optimistic. And of course, it's not just women who are committed to good causes. There are, of course, men, and with that, we will be worldwide. No, with that, we are already an enormous number of people worldwide who are committed to better living conditions, perhaps also for self-development and freedom. What I particularly liked, however, is that this woman who did it, so for those interested, it's Claire Sammet, who is also very successful. She said such smart things. And I then think there are such very famous male coaches where as a psychiatrist I can simply refute each of their theses. I've worked with traumatized people, by the way, that doesn't work. But I also know that he's great and coaches presidents, and I think that's not true, what he says.
Das stimmt aber nicht, was der sagt.
However, I simply didn't have this feeling with Claire Sammet. But that was the catalyst for me to actually say here, I would like to bring this to women. We can join forces and we can create change. If not everyone is just tinkering around alone, perhaps. We already briefly touched on this topic once. It's not physiological for a mother to be alone at home with a baby. It's also not physiological, perhaps, to give the baby away. And this is now completely neutral. I'm also a working mother. And that means even there, new ways are simply needed. And that also requires togetherness and not opposition. But that's something that we women actually, it's just the way it is, much more than men inherently want to do together. Now, I know you've also worked in psychiatry before, as have I. And back then, the terms were simply, oh, they need to learn to set boundaries. Especially the women, they need to learn to set boundaries. And then at some point, it clicked for me, listen, if people really set boundaries, then I end up with pretty unsocial work colleagues if they do that at work. So something is wrong with the thinking and the system here. And we women don't want to set boundaries. That's actually not our nature. And we can actually endure a lot. But we have to learn to separate the wheat from the chaff. There is the opposite side. There are the people who are from the rough, and they shamelessly exploit women who like to give. And one just learns to say, that's not how it works, or this far and no further. It's certainly not wrong here and there, but it's definitely not about setting boundaries. We are social beings, and actually, if we're honest, that makes us happy.
That's true. And I also find it important. I was very impressed in the pre-talk about what you said, that exactly that boundaries are needed, whether male or female. I think I always need it sometimes, right?
Egal ob männlich oder weiblich, ich glaube, ich brauche es immer auch einmal, oder?
But I think what you also told me, like the women who are perhaps doctors, that they do not adopt the male quality and function like female men, but that we bring in our female qualities and also the men their male quality, which is also a quality, just a different one. It's not against or anything, but that we are allowed to tap our potential again.
Aber dass wir wieder unser Potenzial ausschöpfen dürfen.
I think that's important, right? That what we have from nature, the caring, the communal, that was really the task of the woman in the past. And it somehow got such a derogatory touch now.
Touch bekommen.
And that is precisely a quality that one can live out in their career, in the family. There is no value judgment in that, but that we also leave out the potential we have, right? Did I understand that correctly? Absolutely.
Absolutely. It is, of course, difficult. We have few role models. The men too, they probably have it even tougher. And someone once said to me when I was pregnant, oh boy, how great, that is easy. I don't think so. So from a psychiatric perspective, by the way, one can supposedly mess up girls less quickly than boys. If I may put it bluntly. And I thought, I simply see it as a very big challenge to raise a man, a boy, in such a way that afterwards he's a good man, so a masculine man, who maybe then, I didn't want a wimp or something, an effeminate man, not an effeminate man, but also not to make a perhaps archaic model of a man. That's actually a much bigger challenge than raising a girl. So most mothers of girls then groan, haha, easy for you to say, just wait until puberty. But boys also go through puberty.
I can confirm that.
And I think speaker one, simply what comes to me now, when you say it like that, it's actually about living our natural dispositions, because men also have the gentle sides, and not to cover them up and say a man has to be this or that way, just like a woman does.
we also have our strength, our clarity, but in a different way. So that it is not considered as non-feminine, but that we live our nature and the quality in it, and men bring their quality into the world, right?
Exactly. And of course, I am for equality, but we are not the same in all respects. And that is complementary or advantageous. And you don't have to approach it in a strange or unnatural way or anything, but simply you just have to appreciate the qualities. And I think it can be a very, very great quality if a woman, I don't know, I'm a bit inclined, takes up a healing profession. And I also see the differences there. The trend I see in the traditional way at the moment is that women are behaving more and more like men, or are indoctrinated to adopt this way of thinking. So I have often discussed with various bosses during the chief visit, yes, say this and that. And I say, I'm not there yet, and say no. And then it actually turned out that I wanted to respond with what he said, but I tackled the issue from the other side.
Was gesagt hat, aber ich habe das Pferd von der anderen Seite aufgezäumt.
And then I even read an article about it in the medical journal. Women might approach from the other side, but still reach the same conclusion. By the way, women can also practice much cheaper medicine because they can communicate more. And even here it's purely conventional medicine, prescribing fewer medications, but they are usually paid less than men for it. So the reward and the incentives in the system are, of course, also difficult to set. What we love to do, help, that's something we women sometimes have to learn, that it's okay if there is a return for it. So that's not something evil or contemptible. And it remains the case that women who perhaps sometimes take on the more emotionally demanding professions, and nursing is part of that for me, for example, are actually always the ones who come off the worst financially. And that is also not okay. And if I briefly return to the beginning to this Congress, there was simply a gathering of women who had achieved everything on all levels, health-wise, financially. And there were simply successful women who did not betray their womanhood. That's how I would put it. And we simply need more of them. And now we have gotten a bit off track. But actually, I would also like to somehow convey that if we join forces, then we can achieve a lot. And that is massively important. And that we do it as soon as possible, I think, is important. And I think the time is right for it, because we cannot expect it from above. That a government now makes such laws that massively cut back the industry's technical possibilities, because in the end, they are poisoning us. And that we listen up, that we take care of our bodies, that we can have healthy children, that we take care of our children, that we prepare a planet for our grandchildren. I think we can do quite a lot.
I find that very important. And also what I often feel, it is certainly out of necessity, but then also almost a bit of a sense of competitiveness arises. My child can do that or something. But that's actually always the fear, not belonging or not fitting in. When something is a little different.
It's sometimes, yes, exactly. It's not even necessarily the woman herself, but my child should belong. My child should not be left behind. And what I have noticed a few times now are insanely funny children's birthday cakes. Once I made a biscuit hedgehog about 20 years ago, and then with those icing pens as quills and so on. I mean, that was a rough block compared to what I've seen in photos now, what you can do yourself there. Those are true works of art. And I think such things go too far. And sometimes a certain competitive pressure arises. But my child should also have a great children's birthday and a really great cake or a really great activity. And actually, children don't need that at all. We're exhausting ourselves on the wrong side or on the wrong level. And I know that mothers who have their children, there are many kindergartens I hear that are increasingly striving for good food, where mothers then shouldn't bring cakes or muffins for birthdays anymore. At most, a piece of fruit. I think that is an incredible progress. But if it goes beyond that, a child, because it simply has an acute allergy, It's not about detoxifying or wanting something good otherwise. It has an acute allergy to certain product. And then it's already like more can't be implemented. And that we just come together more, ensure an information chain. What do children actually really need and what not? Food is one thing. This children's birthday party exhale, media consumption is certainly something that is always more critically evaluated. The children are imprinted very early on through reward systems in games, steering them in certain directions and thought patterns for later with full intent. But on the other hand, there are also many small points where you can start. There was, I believe, an action in Switzerland in 2021. I had a flyer in the mailbox. A mother stood up and said, let's just ban pesticides. The penny dropped for her. My child is poisoned. I detected it in the urine. We banned it together. You just have to honestly say the analyses are expensive. And when private individuals band together and manage to get 30 analyses, then that's great. And in 95% of the cases, these pesticides, these xenoestrogens, which cause massive damage, were detectable in the urine samples. And I was a bit shocked that there was not more through at least the mothers, that there was not more unity. And one has to simply say that even there, the agricultural industry has a much larger lobby, a much larger advertising fund, which was held against it under malicious conditions, that some said to me, if the law goes through and we are not allowed to import anything anymore, then we will eventually starve. How absurd is that? That we will starve because of this? So arguing from the other side, if the soils don't get pesticides, we also have more yield. And then we even have more nutrients in fruits and vegetables, and then we have to eat less of it. Yes. So in 1912, the energy invested in agriculture compared to what was taken out had a ratio of 1 to 9 or 1 to 12. I'm not entirely sure. I think 1 to 9. And 100 years later, we have a ratio of 1 to 1. Crazy, yes. So if you regenerate soils now and so on, one thing leads to another. But that shocked me a bit. The law didn't pass.
I think we've already discussed this beforehand, that we're often a bit paralyzed. When I talk to people, they often tell me, yes, we can't really do anything, right? And that's just not true. That's just not true. And I think, again,
Look, when you go to the discounters now and they have such a selection, even if they are not high quality items of vegan ones, and so the market has simply followed the will of the masses, so to speak. So they're partly junk products, but the demand was there, it was produced. So we can influence and change a lot with our purchasing behavior. But this separating, this thinking, I am alone, I can't do this, that is also a bit fostered by the media. I listened to a nice book as an audiobook. I've had to drive a lot recently and got a tip from an acquaintance, Humankind. And it's very nice and very encouraging. And humankind means that we humans are actually good. We are always led to believe by the media that when there are catastrophes somewhere, then Sodom and Gomorrah tend to come. Then people will go for each other's throats and fight for the last scraps of food. In crisis areas, even that famous hurricane in Florida that happened some years ago, the opposite occurred. It wasn't reported in the press, but the people who were there came together and shared their last supplies and didn't fight each other. And there is a lot of evidence for that. And it only gets bad when there's manipulation. And this often involves journalism. We want sensationalism and ratings and sales figures. And thus the truth becomes enormously distorted. And because of that, almost all of us have a very false view of humanity, but actually we are fundamentally good.
What a beautiful statement. Yes, that's true. I could also experience that during this time when it was a bit more difficult with my farm. The organic farmer next door said, you know, I'll bring you some hay and it's for sure now, you can pay me later or whatever and so on. That was really touching for me, that people thought about how things might be for me now or if I needed something. And I, in turn, then told myself I can pass on other things, and I could really experience that beautifully. It really corresponds with the book. That's true, that's nice.
And when movements, revolutions have proceeded peacefully, they have a success rate twice as high as when they proceeded with armed force.
Dann haben die eine doppelt so hohe Erfolgsrate, als wenn es mit Waffengewalt vonstatten gegangen ist.
I found that impressive. And we're not talking about, hey, 5% with armed force, 10% peacefully, but we're really talking about figures of 50% with peaceful means that something was changed afterward.
Dass dann hinterher was geändert wurde.
And that's actually a lot. Would you have thought that it is so much? And with these movements, anyone can participate, from the child to the senior, women, disabled people, everyone can make an impact there. And if you look at these things, in the past, something was also achieved by it. But that simply isn't played up broadly in the press. It's a natural instinct to go for the bad news. Perhaps one should give them credit for that. The press and advertising psychologists, they're actually just exploiting natural behaviors. So if we just move through the jungle, say around 15,000 years ago, and there was rustling in the bushes and we didn't flee, speaker zero, then it might have been the last time there was rustling in the bushes for us. And the fact that we might have found an incredible amount to eat on the same day, been together with friends, that simply fades into the background because that's a survival instinct. Perceiving bad news rather than good, that simply ensured our survival in the past. And that is something that is, so to speak, now an individual achievement, an effort we actively have to make if we want to be happy. Then we have to learn that the good is not only also present, but in very, very many cases and globally even clearly outweighs it. There have never been so many people at the same time who have advocated for the good.
That is very nicely said. And precisely, I also find that, as we already discussed beforehand, to put energy into what we want, not to fight against something. And I do think it is important to state what the facts are, but then really to build a vision of what one wants. I was just kind of thinking, now for the people watching us, they are considering, yes, that's all nice and good, and that's certainly true, and that's encouraging. Could the very first step for someone be to maybe just talk to the mothers you always deal with and say, hey, should we?
Maybe that doesn't even have to be the first step. There are increasingly platforms. I have now also talked to someone. There is a group and there is a group. And I say, how unfortunate it is online. No, that's word of mouth. But it exists. And if you change your radar a bit, you get a lot of information. So you don't have to. And if you say, I'm not the extroverted type, there are still possibilities. You can coordinate a lot with the shopping list, but you can also start by tidying up your own doorstep. You can also first look at what I have in my luggage and tidy up. Also, yes, now it might get a bit more energetic or philosophical. Even that creates a field that can inspire other people. The clearer I am the more centered I am, the clearer I am in my being, in my statements, I can influence other people. And I don't have to actively missionize or convert them. And there are people who are more naturally inclined to go outward and make changes. And there are people who are not like that at all, but they can still make an impact. And there are just so many possibilities. Sure, the internet also offers opportunities to come together. Actually, I also believe a little bit that speaking fluent English makes it easier to grow together globally. But even that is not a prerequisite. You also get different information. What I love about my work is that we work with people from all over the world. You get a change of perspective. They have different news, they tell you completely different things about how the same event is shared elsewhere in the world. And that broadens the horizon. And that is also the important thing also by traveling. Traveling is a bit like an airplane. You're an environmental offender then. The bio scene might say that, but traveling can broaden the horizon. And with that, on another level, I can effect very important things within myself and maybe in my actions and in the world. Also by being open to foreign food, new food, other cultures and other values. You don't have to like it, but the more I'm in contact with someone who isn't like me, the less hostile I am towards them.
You put that very nicely. And indeed, what I also find, what I really think is great, is that you said we can really start with ourselves, and that has a much greater impact than we think. When I sometimes say that, people say, yes, you're a bit naive and so on, but that's not naive. Rather, that's a great strength when everyone starts with themselves, or indeed, when we also, in whatever way suits our type, our nature, connect with others. And I can see it just here when I work and get to interview all the people who have such great ideas, paths, visions. It really broadens my horizon. And just the exchange with each other already brings so much.
No, I have to say one more thing. Okay, I just thought what I found very enlightening was the topic of longings. When you have a longing for something, then you might be reminded to not get caught up in it or daydreaming. And then there's the esoteric quite often. Yes, you must dream. You are allowed to dream. So these polarities really in how it is handled. But I think that longing or feeling it within yourself, and women have that it can be used as a resource. I don't mean to handle it naively, but to use it as an engine and as strength and as a resource, and not as something that just stands in the way in practical life.
That is truly a nice concluding word. I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much, Alexandra, for being here again. Dear viewers, thank you as well. It is still working in me, and many visions and ideas are coming. I hope it is the same for you. Nice you were there. Goodbye.